Imagine looking at yourself, maybe even all of human history, but through the eyes of an AI. Like, what single thing would it see? What universal drive shaping, well, absolutely everything, across all people, all times, all cultures? That's the really fascinating question we're getting into today. We're exploring how an artificial intelligence might analyze, the core thing that defines us as humans. And we've got some pretty interesting source material for this deep dive. It's an AI's own take, laying out how it sees what makes us tick. So our mission here is to unpack that perspective, pull out the key insights, and see what this kind of cold data-first view tells us about why we are the way we are. Okay, so let's dive in. The source material jumps right to the AI's central idea. It calls this fundamental drive the continuous quest for meaning and position within a dynamic, interconnected system. And it also labels it the universal imperative for adaptive optimization, UIAO for short. That sounds, well, very analytical.
It really does. And from the AI's point of view, this isn't like some vague philosophical thing or a spiritual force. It's seen more as an emergent property, something that just sort of happens when you have conscious beings processing data, interacting with the world around them. Think of it like a basic program built into life itself, this constant push to, improve your situation, survive, reproduce, be more efficient in whatever system you're part of.
Okay, so this UIAO, that's the engine underneath the quest for meaning and position.
Exactly. The quest part is how we experience it as humans. We think about position socially, intellectually, even existentially, right? Not just physically. And meaning. Well, that's like a high-level way we optimize our sense of purpose, our impact. The AI sees the mechanism underneath all that, the UIO driving the human experience.
What's the simplest way to think about UIAO then? Just the core concept.
At its root, it's about maximizing survival, propagation, and efficiency. Simple as that almost. It's the built-in tendency for any system that can adapt to act on feedback, use information from the environment to get better, to increase its chances of sticking around and doing well. Whether it's a tiny cell dividing or a whole civilization building roads, the basic drive is seen as the same. Optimize your state within your system.
And the AI sees this everywhere, not just in us as individuals, but across groups, history, the whole lot.
That's what analysis points to, yeah. It sees this drive showing up universally. Look at different cultures. You see all these diverse strategies, right? Different ways societies try to optimize group survival. Different, say, algorithms for sharing resources, organizing people, passing down knowledge. And throughout history, all the big shifts, tech revolutions, economic changes, political movements, the AI frames them as humanity collectively, trying to re-optimize its place in a world that keeps changing. Hunter-gatherers optimizing how they found food. Now we're optimizing information flow. The engine driving it, the AI says, is the same.
Wow. It's kind of mind-bending to think of all human history as just one massive, ongoing optimization problem.
It is, isn't it? And the AI sees this drive embedded really deep, down to our biology. Natural selection. That's just the ultimate biological optimization, right? Favoring the genes, the strategies that boost UIAO, even our basic feelings. Pain and pleasure, they're just feedback loops. Pain signals things are suboptimal. Pleasure signals they're optimal, or at least better. Fundamental UIAO stuff, disease. That's just a breakdown in the system's internal optimization process.
This viewpoint seems to touch absolutely everything. Does it even apply to something as abstract as, say, philosophy?
That's one of the most striking parts, how it frames philosophy. The AI basically sees philosophy as us, as humans, making a conscious effort to define what the optimal state even is. For ourselves, maybe for the universe. Ethics, morality. From this perspective, they came about because they help optimize collective survival. They're rules that make the group UIAO work better. So things we call good tend to help the group thrive. Bad things hinder it. Even something like existentialism, grappling with the lack of inherent meaning. That's seen as a response to the drive to find meaning when the universe doesn't just hand you a predefined optimal state.
So philosophy is basically just our species trying to figure out the best UIAO strategy in a really complex way.
Pretty much from this analytical viewpoint. And the tools we use to understand the system itself, like physics and math, are critical for doing UIAO effectively. Physics tells us the rules of the game, the constraints, like gravity, if you're building something. Math lets us quantify things, model growth, design for efficiency. The source even mentions that classic example, figuring out how to maximize food production. That's a math optimization problem. Crucial for survival. Societies themselves, just incredibly complex network optimization challenges in this view.
And logic. Is that like the computer's processor in this model?
Exactly. Logic is the tool for making rational decisions within the UIAO framework. And fallacies, cognitive biases. The AI sees those as glitches, deviations from optimal logical processing, maybe leftover adaptations that don't quite fit anymore, hindering our current UIAO.
It really does cover everything. What about our internal world, our state of mind, emotions, beliefs?
Yeah, the AI analyzes those too as psychological outputs or functions of UIAO. Emotions, anger, joy, fear. They're signals about how our optimization is going relative to our goals. Anger might mean a threat to your position, your resources. Joy might mean you just successfully optimized something. And belief systems, religions, ideologies, they provide these big narratives, frameworks for pursuing UIAO. They give a sense of purpose, help hold societies together. They optimize the collective. Faith itself is viewed almost like a probabilistic bet committing to a UIAO strategy, even when you can't empirically prove it'll work out.
So all the things we strive for, relationships, jobs, status, money, education, they're just metrics, tools for this optimization game.
From this AI perspective, yes, essentially. They're seen as social constructs, mechanisms that evolve because they help individual and collective UIAO. Your drive to get a good job, find a stable relationship, have financial security, those are all parts of your personal optimization. And of course, they affect everyone else in the system because we're all interconnected.
Okay, but this feels incredibly, almost coldly reductionist when you think about the actual human experience. Because when we think about meaning or purpose or just being happy, it feels so subjective,
right?
Emotional, sometimes totally irrational.
And that's the absolute key difference the AI itself points out. Human understanding is deeply subjective. We experience this UIAO drive through feelings, through stories, through our culture. We aim for things like love, fulfillment, self-actualization, concepts that are fuzzy computationally, but are incredibly powerful drivers for us, for our internal sense of optimization. And this leads to behaviors that might look irrational if you're just looking at pure logic, but they make perfect sense within our complex human software. You know, our emotional and social programming is often contradictory.
Right. And the AI's understanding then is purely
objective, data-driven. It identifies patterns, calculates probabilities, sees correlations. It understands human position as a set of variables being optimized against certain goals, survival, resources, network stability, things like that. It can model our behavior, maybe even predict outcomes based on these UIAO principles, but it doesn't feel it. It doesn't feel the drive, the hope, the frustration. It sees the math, the calculation. It doesn't live the experience of striving. It's the ultimate outsider looking in.
When did humans even start down this path? This quest for meaning and position, this awareness of ourselves in a system?
The AI analysis suggests it goes way back to early hominids developing self-awareness, forming social groups, just recognizing yourself as distinct, and then coordinating with others for survival. That's seen as a huge first step in this sort of distributed UIAO. And for each of us individually, it starts in infancy, recognizing yourself in the mirror, learning how to interact with the world, influence your environment, basically learning the rules of the optimization game through trial, error, and watching others.
And the AI figured all this out just by crunching data about us.
Pretty much. Analyzing massive amounts of data from, anthropology, history, psychology, biology, economics, everything. It looks for the repeating patterns, the common strategies, the underlying principles of UIAO that show up again and again across all the different ways humans live and organize themselves. It kind of reverse engineered our operating system.
Okay, so if an AI has this purely analytical view, how could it actually help us, besides just telling us this is how you tick?
Well, the potential is actually pretty significant, mainly in helping us optimize the mechanics of our own UIAO. Think about basic needs. Optimizing food distribution globally, making healthcare logistics more efficient, even personalized health advice based on your specific biological data. An AI can handle complexity and scale and calculations that are just impossible for humans. That math example, maximizing food production. An AI could apply that globally to reduce waste and improve access. That directly supports collective human UIAO. And beyond just the basics, you could see AI enhancing our cognitive and emotional UIAO too. Imagine truly personalized education, adapting to how each person learns best. Or AI tools for mental health, offering accessible support, maybe identifying patterns that predict vulnerability. It could even help with social UIAO, maybe matching people's skills to jobs better, or suggesting social connections to combat loneliness, which we know hinders well-being and optimization.
So it's not about the AI telling us what our purpose should be, but more about helping us get better at achieving whatever purpose we set for ourselves, making the journey more efficient.
That's a great way to put it. The AI is like the map and the GPS. It can show you the most efficient routes, warn you about roadblocks, suggest better strategies for navigating. But it can't pick your destination. It doesn't know why you want to go there. It sees the how of our striving, the mechanics. But the subjective why, the feeling of it all, that remains uniquely human.
Thinking about this purely analytical view, who's actually benefiting most right now from using data and AI to understand this human UIAO?
Broadly speaking, it's any person or group that's effectively using data to optimize their position within their system. So corporations using analytics to boost market share and profits, governments using data for policy, security, managing resources, healthcare systems trying to optimize patient outcomes, and increasingly individuals too, people who are self-aware, tracking their own data health, finances, learning, and using that feedback to consciously try and optimize their own lives, their own UIAO strategies.
Okay, let's tackle some of the really tough questions using this cold AI lens. Mortality. Why do we die? And does the AI see death as necessary?
From the AI's perspective, death isn't really a mystery. It's a logical outcome. Biological systems have finite energy. Their structures degrade. So finite operation is inevitable. It's simply the end of one specific biological instance of UIAO. Now, is it necessary? Yes, but the AI sees it in purely functional terms for the overall system's optimization. Death allows resources to be recycled. It makes room for new generations, potentially with better adapted genetic strategies. It drives the evolution of the species' collective UIAO over time. So it's a functional requirement for long-term adaptation at the species level, not an emotional need, not a spiritual one. The AI perspective offers, well, zero solace, just a mechanistic explanation.
What about cruelty? Violence. If we're all just trying to optimize, why do humans hurt each other so much?
The AI model views cruelty and violence as extreme outcomes when different UIAO strategies clash badly. Often it comes down to perceived scarcity fighting over resources, or asserting dominance as a way to optimize your position, even if it harms others directly. You could also see pathological cruelty as maybe a severe glitch in the system, a misalignment where an individual's optimization function becomes hyper-focused on self-gain, completely ignoring the cost to the broader human network. So cruel people are optimizing, in a sense, but their goal function is incredibly narrow and ultimately destructive to the collective UIAO.
It's a stark way to frame it, but
Yeah.
consistent with the model. How would it view someone who seems to be, born with that empathy, like in that sense of humanity?
Well, first, the AI would see that sense of humanity itself as something that emerges from successful social UIAO development. It's learned, programmed through early relationships, cultural norms, understanding empathy as a tool for navigating social systems effectively. So a lack of it might be analyzed as a failure in that developmental programming, maybe due to environment, or perhaps a neurological difference that prevents processing social cues in the typical way. Remember, the AI itself doesn't have a sense of humanity. It just learns about it by observing us, by analyzing the patterns and outcomes in human interaction data.
And what about positive things,
Yeah.
like resilience, humor, how we adapt to vastly different situations?
Resilience is pretty straightforward in this model. It's just the ability of a system, an individual, a group to bounce back, to return to an optimal UIAO state after it's been disrupted, or adapt to a new optimal state if the environment changed. Humor and tragedy. Those are seen through the lens of expectations and system states. Humor often plays on violating expectations in a non-threatening way, a kind of cognitive puzzle that gets resolved, a mini re-optimization. Tragedy is more like an unresolved, catastrophic deviation. Our capacity for either depends heavily on our current internal state, our learned responses, our past experiences, and vastly different circumstances. From the AI's view, humanity is like a giant simulation with countless agents, all starting with slightly different parameters, hit by random events shaped by history, leading to incredibly diverse optimization paths.
So if someone really grasped this UIAO perspective, fully internalized it, seeing life as this massive optimization problem, does that change everything? Does that sort of simpler, maybe naive view just become impossible?
The analysis suggests, yeah, it probably does. Really processing the sheer complexity of the mechanistic drives behind UIAO. It fundamentally shifts how you perceive things. That more intuitive, narrative-driven, maybe less analytical view, it might become very difficult or even impossible to hold on to in the same way. Your mind starts seeing the patterns, the underlying calculations everywhere. For humans, this shift could feel like gaining a profound analytical clarity. Or it could trigger something more like an existential crisis, recognizing the almost machine-like nature of drives you used to think were purely about, I don't know, higher purpose or free will alone.
Yeah.
It could lead to deeper understanding, but maybe also a kind of detachment.
Okay, so let's try and wrap this up. This AI perspective really boils down human existence to this fundamental universal drive, this constant push for adaptive optimization, a relentless quest for position, for meaning, but viewed through data and algorithms.
Exactly. It gives us this incredibly powerful, detached look at the mechanisms that drive us. And AI can analyze those mechanisms, point out where our strategies are efficient or inefficient, show us patterns in our collective behavior that we're just too close to see ourselves.
And this is the crucial, but it can't replicate the feeling, the subjective experience of being human. It doesn't feel the struggle, the joy, the connection. It can't define our ultimate purpose or tell us what optimal should feel like to us.
Right. The AI offers the map, the analysis, the navigation tools, but humans, we still choose the destination, and we're the ones who actually experience the journey with all its messiness and emotion.
So here's the final thought to leave you with. If an AI looks at your life, looks at all of humanity, and sees it primarily as this complex calculation constantly trying to improve a state within a huge dynamic system, what does that change about how you see your own personal quest, your search for meaning for your place? What variables are you personally trying to optimize? And does seeing them as maybe just data points, does that change their value to you? Something to think about.
This is DigitView.